It's a working man I am. And
Hello, my name is Roger Monks. I worked down the coal mines 27 years, and what I've done is I've set a collection up. 40 years collecting coal mining memorabilia. And when we moved to Bridlington, I brought it with me, and I've set a little museum up. And what I would like to do today is I'd like to show you my collection. I'd like to talk about little things in my collection, and also I'd like to talk about is when I sit in here and look at this mining gear I've got, the plates, the lamps, it brings back memories of the old men I worked for. Down the pit, I met many men working down there, old men, young men, and they worked so hard for the money. They told so many stories, and they learnt you so much. And also, they looked after us young ones. They showed us how to work safely, and they looked after us, and they made us into miners that we turned out to be. If you want to call it lucky, we were the lucky generation, because my father, all he saw were hand pick and a shovel, and shoveling coal all day long. We saw and we worked on the hand filling faces, and then we saw the big machines come into the pit. Going back to when I was 15, the training officer at the colliery, he was a very nice bloke, and it's time for young lads, and he would say to you, do you understand your wage note? Do you understand your pay? And that was good for us. And I always said after that, one day I would love to be training officer at this colliery, Ollerton Bywater Colliery. Here's a picture of Ollerton Bywater Colliery where I worked for 27 years. It was a good colliery. It was nice and warm, so with no damp. The colliery ran from 1875 to 1992. It produced 60 million tonnes of coal over its time. The coal was of good quality. Most of it went to schools, hospitals and homes because it was a low ash content coal. Over 100 men lost their lives at Ollerton Bywater, the youngest being 14 years of age. And in 1992, sadly, with the loss of all those jobs, it was the last pit in Leeds when it closed. And it was a shame because there was another 20 or 30 years of good quality coal. The little village that I lived in, Kippax, it was a mining village, and it was brought up on coal mining and farming. And most of my life I loved living there. I enjoyed it. It's my village and it's still my village. I love Kippax dearly, and that's where I spent most of my working life until I retired. And then we came to live at Bridlington, and I set my museum up, and I'm going to go around my museum today and just show you the amount of stuff I've collected. And the reason I've collected it is because I want the younger generation to be able to see my things I've collected, how we worked in the coal mines and what we did and how we earned us money. And don't forget this, coal mining did make the country great. There's no doubt about that. In the Industrial Revolution, the first thing they needed was coal for the steel industry, the iron industry, to make the big steam engines, to make the boats and the barges on the canals. They needed coal for steam. Just before the age of 15, I said to my father, I've got a job on the building site as a joiner. And he turned around in a nasty voice and he said, who's going to keep thee for £2.60 a week? When I go to pit and I'll get £6 a week. So, without any arguments with your father in those days, I set off to see Billy Ashley, under manager from school, to get there before 12 o'clock. Billy Ashley were a little fella, just come out at pit with his pit muck on, really terrifying to look at. He shouts, come in, lad, come in. He says, what they call thee? Who's thy name? Who's thy father? Is there a good worker? Is there good at school? Good timekeeper? Start a Monday or screens. Little did I know he meant this Monday coming. So we only had 2 days off school, and on Monday morning I went with my new pit boots on, my new hat on and my pit clothes, and we went to work on the screens, and it was hell. It was a really hellish job, the worst job I've ever had in my life. There were dust flying all over, there were noise off the conveyors, there were noise off the belts running over the top of your head, and we used deaf and dumb language. That's all you could do. You couldn't talk to the bloke next to you. And what we used to do is, if you wanted snap, you mentioned that. When do we go for snap? And they used to give you time by signals, 1:30 or 2:30, and that's how you worked through the whole 7 or 8 hour shift. When the belt stopped, you were allowed to go up to the snap cabin, and you took a bottle of cold tea on pipes, and then you just snap out a newspaper, 2 sandwiches, and then back onto that belt. And it was horrendous work. The reason they sent the young lads, our age at 15, new starters, onto the screens is because they couldn't get enough people to employ. They were old men, they couldn't get jobs anywhere else, bless them. So you had to join them and make the staff up until they could get some more young lads started. And then you went down pit. At 18 years of age, I left the pit and I went and joined the army. We were lucky in the pits in a way. If you didn't want to go in the army, you were exempt, and this continued on from the war days. But most colliery managers, if you volunteered and went in the army, they wouldn't stop you, they'd let you go. So at 18, I wanted to follow my brother's footsteps and go in the parachute regiment. But when I got to Leeds office, they said, you're going in the RAMC, the Royal Army Medical Corps. And that's where I went. I was posted to Germany after my basic training in Crookham near Aldershot. Well, I was lucky, it was peacetime, and they sent us to Germany, and I worked in a British military hospital in Germany for 2.5 years, and I really enjoyed myself in the army. I came out, I couldn't get in the parachute regiment with my brother, but I came out of the army and there was a depression on, so I went back into the coal mines again to complete my 27 years in the coal mines. I've travelled through many bookshops, I've travelled through antique shops, charity shops, looking for little clippets of coal mining. I've looked for photographs of coal mining, and it's surprising where you can go and get little pieces of information. The snippets I've taken from books, from charity shops, from bookshops, on my journeys over the last 40 years, and I've formed this big collection of these big folders all together for future generations to read and have a look through. The other things I've put together to make things interesting on my talks is little household things. I'm going to show you a bus ticket machine that the old Clippies, that's the bus conductors, when we used to have them on the buses, they used to take your money and give you a ticket. And this old bus ticket machine is from the days of, I should think, about 1940s onwards. And the picture of the lady is a black girl, and she was the first conductress in Bradford to be given a job on the buses. And on the Monday morning, when she stepped onto the bus to do her duties, all the bus clapped her and said congratulations. Another item I've got is when we was little, if a pan got a hole in, a frying pan or a cooking pan, you went to the local hardware shop and you bought a washer. You put it in your pan with a screw in, you fastened it together and it tightened up and it stopped the fluid leaving your pan, and it's called a pan washer. And you reuse your pan, and you reused it again, probably putting a second washer in. You never had the money to replace the pan like you do nowadays. And this is a pan washer in a little article I put it in to keep people's memories alive that's old like myself. The other thing I'd like to show you is a canary cage. We all had canaries at the colliery, and if there were an incident, the rescue men used to take a canary down in a cage. Why did they take a canary down? Well, if there was gas about, the canary dropped off the perch, and that was a warning to the rescue men, get out now, because the canary went down first, and it meant there was not enough oxygen about and there was gases present. And each colliery had 4 canaries all the time at the pits. And when the pits closed, that law never altered. They still had 4 canaries. All they brought machines out, what they call methanometers, to test for gas in place of canaries. Why didn't they use sparrows that were cheap? Well, I'll tell you why. They didn't use sparrows because the sparrows used to roost round the chimney pots. And the chimney pots were warm, so they rested there on a night. And carbon monoxide came out of the chimneys, so the sparrows took carbon monoxide in, and they were used to it. So no good for going down pitting the gases. So that's why they used canaries. Going back to the pits, it was a camaraderie. It was the fellas that you worked with, that you trusted with your back, that looked after you, that we all enjoyed working with. And some of these chaps, they used to go home after hard shift work on the coal face, and they had market gardens, they had big allotments, and they used to produce food for the table from these allotments and market gardens. How they used to do it, I don't know. Us younger generation couldn't keep up with them, although we tried hard. But they used to have some had pigs. And a little story I want to tell you about a pitman. At the end of the Second World War, which I remember quite well, you had to have a licence to kill a pig. And you were allowed to kill 1 pig a year for yourself. Now, the Chief Inspector of Leeds came to this chap's house and he says, "You've been reported for killing a second pig." He says, "No, boss, I haven't." He says, "Well, you've been reported, so we must inspect the house." They went up the stairs, did the inspector. The sergeant from Kippax, Sergeant Cooper, was with him. He looked in the coal place, he looked in the toilets outside, he looked everywhere. He says, "Well, I'm sorry." He says, "We do get false reports," but he says, "We've got to come and inspect them." My little brother had got a new train for Christmas, and he was running to the sergeant and saying, "Jack Jacket coal place, Jack Jacket coal place, Jack Jacket coal." He says, "Yes, I know. It's a lovely train. It's a red train, isn't it? It's a lovely train. Jack Jacket coal place, Jack Jacket coal place." He says, "Yes, it's a lovely train. Have you got it for Christmas?" Well, my brother used to call a pig a Jack Jack. So the inspector said, "Thank you, I'm sorry to disturb your evening. I'll leave you. It's a false alarm." And off he went. The Sergeant Cooper knocked on his door in half an hour's time and said, "When you get that pig out of the coal place, I want 2 joints off it." He says, "How do you know it's in coal place?" He says, "Your little lad were telling me the Jack Jack's at coal place, Jack Jack's at coal place." He says, "I knew where the Jack Jack were." He said, "But the inspector were that thick and daft from Leeds, he hadn't a clue where the pig was, but he said, I knew where it were." And what he'd done is thrown the coals out, hid the second pig wrapped in hessian sack in the coal place, and then it thrown all the coal back in. And the inspector didn't know, but the Sergeant Cooper did. When I was a young lad at 15, and just at 15 and a half, I went for my underground training, and I went down the pit at 15 and a half. They brought a law out that each miner underground has got to wear a hard safety hat. The miners previous to this and up to this day wore a flat cap. And a lot of them didn't like these hard hats, although they got sent to us. If you bumped your head on the girders or low props, it saved you bumping your bare head with a flat cap on. But there were one or two miners down the pit and they objected to them. And the union had to go to them and say, look, the manager's going to sack the men that's wearing flat caps, that's not wearing a safety helmet. So you must go to the stores, get a free helmet that's a safety helmet, a hard hat, and throw your flat cap away. And they were very reluctant, but that's what we had when we were 15 years of age, and that's when they were introduced. We also had a battery lamp to put on his belt to go underground. And then they introduced a self-rescuer. These were very heavy. And in case of a fire or of an explosion, you had to break open your lid and put your self-rescuer on. These were a German invention. And what the Germans did, they built a tank, they had the exhaust going into the tank and gassing the soldiers. So they had to come up with an idea, and they brought a self-rescuer out. So the soldiers went in the tank with a self-rescuer on to protect them from carbon monoxide. And these would give us 1.5 hours protection at a walking distance to come out of the pit, which were adequate time to get from your place of work out to your pit. And all these were on your belt. Lots of these oil lamps that we've got, some of the ordinary miner had them. They couldn't relight them. Once they went out, they were out. But the deputies had a relighter. He could relight his lamp down the pit. Because every 2 years he had to go to Whitwood Technical College and he had to go through a gas cap system where he had to go in and read these gas caps. And these, my collection here is starting from the old bulb and the battery in. The miners kicked up against these. They said candles were better, but candles were making explosions, blowing the pit up. But they said that candles used to cause nystagmus in the eyes, and that were making it so that the men couldn't see properly. And they complained about these electric lamps too. But I think that's same in all life. People just don't like changes. What I do with my collection is I go around and put displays on and talk to schools or societies or different people and try and put a story on. We can remember the ration book days, so I try and put a story on from the ration book days and when I was a lad and started pit and worked through the pit life. And it makes an interesting story. I've made a model with a young lad in, a young mining lad that used to work down the pit. These young lads went down at the age of 7, 8 and 9, and the reason they had to go down was to help to put bread and meat on the table. And they worked down the pit at 6 o'clock in the morning and they came out 6 at night. And one doctor came to the village and he said to the mine owner, I'm going to make your name sound horrible, because he says you're sending young lads down the pit and you're cruel to them. And this mine owner said, come with me tomorrow, doctor, to the pit and I'll show you something different. And he took the doctor to the pit head, the cage come up, the young lads at 6-year-old came out at 6 o'clock and they run like mad home. He says, now then, if I were working those lads hard, how can they run home like that? He says, I haven't finished with it yet. I want you to come to the sports field and have a look there. He says, in an hour, they'll have had the bread and the meat at home and they'll be back on this playing field. And bang on time, these young lads came back, running back onto the playing field, and they played while dark at football, running up and down the field. He says, if I'm working these lads too hard, how can they run and play like this? He says, he's talking a load of nonsense, Doctor. But that's how life was. The lady in the model that I take around with me, they called them pit brow girls. And they used to wear a scarf over the forehead to keep the hair clean. And that's why they call them the pit brow girls. And I've got a model of her. I take them round to displays. I take my boards out to displays. A lot of people, especially the old miners, then come and look at my exhibition, and it brings back memories. I sit in here in my little museum at Bridlington, and I look round, and each item brings a moment back of a chap, a miner that worked at Holland by Water. And I remember him to this very day, how hard he worked, how he taught us both safety down the pit and also how to live out of the pit, how to behave ourselves, how to be polite to people, and how to go out and enjoy yourself at weekend, having a pint with them. And they were some of the best men that I have ever worked in my life and ever seen or ever talked to or ever had a laugh in the clubs with. And that's how we used to live. During the COVID, it made it so that everybody stayed in the homes. They couldn't go out, they couldn't do the things they wanted to do. So I decided to make some models of what I remembered about life and about the pits. The first one I made was a bell pit. And what the miners used to do, they used to dig down to the coal seam and bell out on it, make a bell, taking the coal until it got dangerous. And once it got dangerous, started falling in, they abandoned that pit. And they threw the shovel from the top, and as far as it would go, they went and they took the next bell pit. The other one I made was a proper coal face that we were not used to down the pit. And it continues, it makes a road and a coal face to work on with a conveyor belt in where you throw your coal on. The other one I made was a pony stable. When we were 15 years of age and went down the pit, the first thing we saw were the pony stables with all the ponies in. And we had special men at the pit that used to have allotments or little small holdings. They used to take a few cabbages or a bit of fruit or a bit of bread. And they used to say to the pony, the favourite one, stand over, and they used to feed the favourite pony with a little bit of fresh fruit. The other one I made was a one up and a one down miner's cottage. This entailed one room downstairs and one room up, and that's all you had. If you had 6 children, they all slept in the same bedroom with the mother and father. Downstairs, you had a little room. In the corner, you had a set pot where you filled it with cold water, lit a fire underneath, and that boiled your hot water for your tin bath and for your washing and everything else, cleaning up in the house. The man used to come home then, there were no pit baths, he used to come home from pit, get the tin bath out, his wife used to fill it up for him, and he used to climb in and take this bath in front of the coal fire. The other one I've made is the last pit, and it's a headgear of a pit and a chap bringing a pony out on a cage, and he's a miner at side waving goodbye with the indication this is the last pit in all the country. At 15 and a half, I was working on the chain haulage in the pit bottom, which is where most of us started underground. And then I went with the bricklayers, working with the bricklayers, labouring for them a while. Then I went on to my coal face training, which were hand filling. That's with a pick, a shovel, and you filled 20 tonne of coal off a day. It was 6 yards long and 6 foot in, and it was that slab of coal that you shot fire blew it into bits. But what made it harder still is people wanted to buy big coal. They didn't want small coal. And the undermanagers used to race up up onto the district, following the conveyor up with the coal on, and woe betide the shot fire if it was small coal. He used to jump on him like a ton of bricks. Then I moved from there onto ripping, and that was making the roadways. We were moving big stone, making it into a pack hole to support the face sides. From there, I moved and I got a job as a basic mining instructor. And I went training young lads. We took them at 15, 16 years of age. We put them through a course of training, and then they went back to their own pit to work at their own collieries. I passed my deputy's papers, and this was very hard because most of the time it was difficult to get to school from lack of money for dinner monies. So most of the time we were knocking, we were playing, we didn't go. But I passed my deputy's papers, we went deputying, and then Monday the training officer came down the pit when I was working, and he said, would you like to come as my assistant training officer? This I've told you before. I always thought through my mining career I'd love to be the training officer at this colliery, helping young lads along the way to my best ability. And I went as assistant training officer. He retired after 12 months, and I took the training officer's job. And I'm going to give you an example of how I helped a lad and how it came back to me on Bridlington Harbour after I'd moved here. This young lad came in and he said that, when can I go coal-face training? I've been turned down with a bank for a mortgage for my house. And I said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll write a letter to the bank and I'll tell them that in the next 6 weeks you're going on your face training and your wage will go up to a certain amount. And that should give you a mortgage from the bank. I wrote it down, a letter for him, and he sent it, and he came back and he told me, he says, the bank on those conditions have given me a mortgage for me and my wife as first house. So I made sure he went to coal-face training as I promised him in 6 weeks' time. And as I was walking through the harbour so many years later after the pit shut, this lad came along with his wife and he said, this chap here got our first mortgage for us. Oh, she says, what, this chap? He says, yes, he was training officer that gave me that letter that day. And he said, we're still in that house. And I was quite pleased with that. And it was many more lads that I helped. A lot of men came from other collieries and they brought the records with very little on. And I said to them, have you worked at other pits? And they said, yes, we have. I said, well, these should be on your records. If you get made redundant in the future, they'll need this information of where you worked. I said, go home, and the best idea is talk to your wife and ask her what dates, roughly, you worked at those pits. He says, how will she know? I said, because she'll say, we had baby so-and-so, such and such a date, and that's the date you worked at that pit. I said, and from them dates, I can go to area records at Featherstone and I can find out from the clerk there of the exact date you started and the date you finished. And I added these to the records. And when the redundancies came up, when they were shutting the pits down, a lot of these chaps got not only extra lump sum, but also extra monthly payments. So there I enjoyed my training officer's job that I wanted all my life and all I look forward to. And with luck, a bit of skill and a bit of learning, that's how I became the training officer at Alton Bywater Colliery. Well, I hope you've enjoyed looking at my collection today. I hope you've enjoyed a little bit of the crack that us coal miners used to give down the pit as we're working hard. But I'd like to finish off today with my favourite poems. It's one I haven't writ, it's one I've collected over the years, and I've kept it, and I use it quite a lot at my talks. And it's called To Me Dad, the Coal Miner. In honour of the coal miner, I pen these words today. My dad was a coal miner, he worked hard for his pay. His dad was a coal miner, and my mother's dad too. I owe my life to coal miners, the hard life that they knew. They sacrificed themselves for us to have a better life. So let us remember them, the miner and his wife. And I thank you all.
Before your time, and the coal dust lies heavy on your lungs. It's a working man.